Alright guys, it's raining here today, so we're going to try something a little different. We got to shoot in the shed. I'm sorry, I'm sure you can hear the rain on the tin roof. And for those of you who hate the rooster, we solved that problem. We got a duck. There's the duck. Alright, so sorry about all the distractions, but a viewer named Carolyn asked, I don't want to say she asked a question, she made a point on one of the MGTOW videos. We were talking about kind of what you look for in a woman, what I thought you should look for in a woman, and she asked the corresponding question. She turned it around and she said, what about a good woman who can't find a man? And I wanted to bring Mariah in on this one, obviously, because she was a good woman who couldn't find a man. I don't like the way that sounded. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. She was a good woman who couldn't find a good man. She could find plenty of bad men, and I guess I'm not one to say she found a good man eventually, but somehow we did sort of get it worked out. So Carolyn, just to give you some background on why this question sort of hit me, we've got 7 daughters total. I have 3 from my first marriage. Mariah brought 3 into the marriage, and then we have one daughter together. My oldest daughter's 19. This might not work.
Wow.
Then we have 2 15-year-old daughters, and I believe a 13-year-old daughter, or 14?
Yeah,
14-year-old daughter. Sorry, Madeline. A 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and then the newborn. So this is a question pressing on our mind. You know, how do we help these girls find husbands in this day and age when men are at such a premium? And because the problem is not the women. Well, I'm sorry. The women didn't cause the problem. The women are the solution to the problem, unfortunately, which drives me nuts. But men cause the problems. Men are the ones who abdicated, who told women, yeah, sure, you take over. Let's see how you guys do for a while. So it was men were the ones who dropped the ball. So in a way, it's a little unfair now that men are the ones who are saying, oh, well, we don't like this anymore. We don't want to have anything to do with it. Because it's a system we allowed to come into fruition through our own negligence. But that's neither here nor there. All that happened 150 years ago, and there's no point in reliving the past. What's a woman today do who can't get married or can't find a man she's willing to get married to? Maybe a little bit of background. When Mariah and I started dating, I already had 1 failed marriage. I'd had a child out of wedlock with another woman. I was not employed, or barely employed. I don't remember for sure now. I was living at my parents' house. I was a train wreck. I was not any man who I would recommend any woman get involved with. And it was through the course of Mariah and I getting together that I sort of got my act back together. It's almost, I try to keep the religious videos, you know, down into the, but it's almost like God just said, all right, you just screwed this up to the nth degree. I'm coming in, I'm hitting the reset button. Here's a job, here's a woman, here's a house. Now get your act together. Because it's kind of just all happened right at once for me. So I'm going to be a little bit hypocritical in what I would say to you. And then I'm going to try to let Mariah talk, but unfortunately I love the sound of my own voice, and she's a very internal person. Would you want to weigh in on where we were at when we met?
Well, I can't argue with the way you described yourself, but I wouldn't describe myself as a very marriage-worthy woman at that point either.
Yeah.
So, no.
Neither one of us, if you saw us back then, you wouldn't recognize us between here and there. I'm not going to sit here and I don't want to act like, you know, we're perfect or we've arrived or anything, but we feel like we're so much farther along that path than we both were when we met. You know, Mariah was a single mom, and you already know what kind of train wreck I was, and neither one of us were living the lives we should have been living. So that's just backstory for everything I'm about to say now. You know, I'm about to talk about what I think you should look for in a man. Mariah's going to say a little bit about maybe what she saw in me that decided to let her take a trip. Yeah, why don't you do that? Why were you even willing to go out with a guy with no job, 6 kids, a wife, a baby mama, and living at home with his parents? I mean, this makes no sense to me. It never has. I actually am looking forward to this explanation.
Put me on the spot here.
I'm sorry. I put you on the spot.
Well, I think the biggest thing was your foundation was there. You even though all those external situation, living at home and all that, but you had figured out your foundation. You had hit rock bottom, and you had come up from there, and figured some things out, and were able to explain those things to me very, very, very clearly, very rationally, and
what had gone wrong and what I meant to do to fix it, or
exactly, yes. I mean, our first conversations were all about gender roles and how your beliefs and everything. So.
All right, that's actually probably a good place to start right there, Carolyn. A man who knows what he believes. A man who believes in something. I just watched that MGTOW video you commented on, and I noticed that I mentioned you needed to choose a woman. A man needed to look for a woman who believed in something bigger than her. So let's turn that around. And you need to look for a man who believes in something bigger than himself. Obviously, if you wanted to ask my opinion, that would be the Christian God, the God of Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. I don't know who you are, where you're at. Make your decide what it is you think's important. Maybe you want to, adopt rescued animals or something. I don't know, but a man who believes in something bigger than himself. I may be tooting my own horn here a little bit, and if I am, forgive me. I think military guys are a good place to start. My stepdaughter mentioned it the other day. How she wanted wanted to marry a veteran when she got older. And a man who's demonstrated an ability or a willingness to sacrifice for something else, to take risks on behalf of others. That seems like a good place to start. He's got to be willing to build towards something. A guy with a vision, not just like a 5-year plan. Not I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, but a man who's got a vision for the future. My vision is I want to establish a nation almost. I want children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, and when that final trump finally sounds and the faithful are taken out of this world, I want a lot of people named Austin in that final moment. That's my vision. That's not my only vision, but a man with a vision. I think a prepper's a real good place to start. This is a guy who's thinking ahead, who's thinking outside the box, who's willing to go against the grain, who's willing to think. Anyway, a guy who's willing to think for himself and not accept received wisdom. I don't know if we're helping at all, Carolyn, or if we're just babbling. But it's a question that has to be answered because, Western society, Christian society, certainly American and European society is on the verge of collapse. Partly because, we can't get men and women to form lasting marriages and raise their children together. I guess. Excuse me, I got a mustache hair. It's almost, and again, I'm going to be a little bit hypocritical because I do feel like I found the perfect woman for me, and like God brought us together. And I won't admit to that. I won't say that's a possibility. You can't wait for God to bring you your perfect person. Normally I would say He's not going to. You have to go out and find that person, whether you're a man or a woman. But there is no perfect men out there. There's no perfect women out there. You've got to find maybe just the best one you can and say, all right, I'm sticking this out no matter what. When Mariah and I got married, our covenant, we don't we have a legal marriage license. We don't really support that. We did it for family. But our covenant between ourselves, but it doesn't matter what happened. We may be miserable for the next 60 years. We're going to die together. We might die in a tragic trailer fire, but we're going to die together no matter what. And we have tested that a few times along the way, both the trailer fire and the 60 years of misery. So in a way, I would say it doesn't matter what kind of man you find. If you find a decent man you can work with, and you can stick with him no matter what, then do it. Because the Walt Disney feelings, they come and go. And you know what? Every single one of us would have to admit that we've felt Walt Disney feelings for people we passed in Walmart and never said the first word to. So if you're looking for Walt Disney feelings, those are nice when they're around. The longer a relationship lasts, the more they're around. But you can't rely on them. I will go religious on you one last time, Carolyn, since we're talking to a woman. And this is getting a little long, so I apologize. I know we're not going to get a lot of people to watch to this point. But if you read the Bible at all, there's a famous story in there about a woman named Ruth. And Ruth she's I don't want to say she's undesirable, but in the culture at the time, she was going to have a hard time getting married where she was at. She was a foreigner. She wasn't an Israelite. She was a Moabite. She was a widow. Not that there's anything wrong with being widows, but she wasn't in the first blush of youth. This wasn't an 18-year-old girl with all of her perkiness and shininess. She was a stranger, and she was a good, hard-working woman, a good, hard-working, loyal woman, and she demonstrated how loyal and hard-working she was. And then when she identified a man she wanted, she went and got him. Now, she didn't prostitute herself. She didn't give up her values. She didn't go say, hey, have sex with me and see what happens. But she went to that man and she made herself available to him very clearly. She almost asked him to marry her after she demonstrated her character and everything. And she ends up being in the lineage of Christ. Her husband Boaz and her ended up having a child who ended up being in the lineage of King David, King Solomon, and all the way down to Christ. So if you don't have to do this Western thing where you just sit around and wait for Prince Charming to show up. Boy, this is so long now. I'm thinking of so many things that I'd like to say, and I wish I'd said earlier. And we're already at 15 minutes. But so if you find a man, you don't have to sit there and wait for him to come to you. That's a Western thing. Now that I'm sure that's awkward. I don't know how that would work. I don't claim to have all these answers. You're not looking to date any man, no matter how good he is. If you come to him and say, "Oh, would you like to have sex?" 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a guy willing to have sex with you. So that you can't take that route. Men are men are men are men are men, and you got to keep that in mind. I would also say, and this would apply to us too, I think. Your father is a wonderful, wonderful resource you have to you to sort of evaluate a man's character and tell you, hey, does this guy have potential or not, or is this guy a moron? Is this guy full of, anyway, Mariah's father he's very, very involved in what we're doing over here as far as the garden and everything. I went to him for permission to marry Mariah. I don't know what conversations they may or may not have had, but as a man, as a father, I can tell you that your father, most likely, even if you don't like him, even if he's a jackass, he's probably going to be able to give you some real good insight on the men around you, and probably be your absolute best resource to weed out the morons. He's going to know. Why? Because he is a man. And he's just going to have sort of a natural read on you, first off, and second off on those men you may run into. There's one other thing I'm going to throw out there for you, and I'm actually glad this video went long and people have quit watching. There are family structures that are acceptable other than those that we accept here in the West. And it's not for everyone, but it's an option. We've got an enforced monogamy in the West that's part of our problem, and I don't think we need to feel constrained by that anymore. Marriages need to be forever, no matter what. But I'm not even sure. I didn't mean to go here. I came up all of a sudden at the end. Look, don't laugh at me.
No, that's good.
Biblical marriage is not. I guess that's what I would leave you with. Biblical marriage is the only way to make it work. Not the only way, but the only way we're going to make it work in our society. Because we've got so far, there's only one way to come back to the beginning, and that's to go back to the beginning. So biblical marriage is not an enforced monogamy. Monogamy is always going to be the default. It is. But polygyny, what's called polygyny, is one man with multiple women is acceptable to God and in the scriptures. And it's probably, well, no, it's definitely in our future. If you believe in the Bible, then it's in our future. It's prophesied in the Old Testament that, here I go, I'm going religious and weird. We just lost a bunch of viewers. It's prophesied in the Old Testament that polygyny will come back around again. Up to 7 women will grab hold of one man, and they will say, we will provide for ourselves our own food, our own clothes. Just give us your name and take away our shame. Because women have a desire for a husband. There's a whole lots of reasons why. I can go into it at a later date. I'm already getting weird at this point, but we're at 20 minutes now, so I don't want to go any farther. So here's what I'd tell you. If you're a Christian, there is the option of biblical patriarchy. Sometimes you call it biblical families, polygyny. Stay away from. I'm not going to tell you to stay away from, but it's this modern enforced monogamous system that has made everything so hard now, and led to this whole sologamy thing, which I wanted to talk about, but we're not going to get to because we're 20 minutes in at this point. And there we go, another one for the blooper reel. So there we are. Carolyn, I don't know if any of that made any sense. That was embarrassing. We're going to leave it though because you guys seem to like the bloopers. But if I could encourage you at all, and I think if Mariah could encourage you at all, we would tell you, you're right. At the base of the problem is not the women, it's the men. The women are going to have to be the first step in fixing it if it's going to be fixed without a major event, cataclysm, shit hit the fan, Teowaki, world without rule of law, unfortunately, and that's a shame, because men are just too far gone. Our modern system, it was supposed to liberate women, and all it liberated was men. Now we get to have sex with any women we want, and we have no obligations and no responsibilities, and we don't have to care for our children or provide for anybody, because Uncle Sugar's out there to do it, and it all falls on the women. And there's not a real good solution. Actually, I just spent 20 minutes convincing myself that, the only real option is to try to get your father involved. You want to leave with anything, baby?
No, I guess not. Can't think of anything.
There you go. Thanks, guys.